All right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. And again, our apologies for being just a few minutes late, because we are certainly cognizant of the importance of your time. And we will get through all of this as quickly as we can, so that we can get you back to those important things that you are doing each and every day. So welcome to Network 19's Independent Provider Session for June. We are talking about the voice of the provider in the planning process, and how we can help you elevate your voice as a direct support professional. I do want to just keep in mind, because I know over the years I've had a lot of feedback about this. When I use the term direct support professional, I use that as a term that includes both employees of agencies as well as independent providers. And I choose to use that term because of the fact that it utilizes the word professional. And so whether you are the employee of an agency or whether you're an independent provider, you are a professional who is providing direct services. So anytime you see DSP or hear me use DSP, please know that it is all inclusive of anyone in a role of providing direct support services to people in our field. We would love to see you. So if you are comfortable with it, turn on your screen, say hello, wave, make funny faces at us, whatever you want to do. If you're not comfortable, we are also just glad to have you here, and feel fine not to have your video on. You are muted when you come in, but you are able to unmute. So feel free to unmute, ask questions, share an experience, and utilize that how you would like. But if you prefer, you also can type your questions in the chat box, and we'll be monitoring the chat box throughout. If we don't have an opportunity to get to a question that you have, please make sure that you just shoot that question to me via email. So after today's presentation, by early next week, you will have a copy of the PowerPoint slide deck, any handouts that we talk about, and it will include in the PowerPoint my email address. So feel free to reach out with any questions that you have. With me today, and I guess I don't even know if I introduced myself, I'm Ann Weissent. I'm the outreach coordinator for 19 Services, which is the agency that has put together and provides you all with Network 19, our space for providers to learn and network together. And with me is Haida Hill, also from 19 Services.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us today.
And Haida's going to drive the presentation for us. So I am a talker. I don't stop. So again, unmute, jump in, say, hey, Ann, get my attention, and we'll take a breather and ask any questions or have any conversation. All right, let's get started. So, a few years ago, I just retired in December from the Department of Developmental Disabilities after 23 years at the department. And a few years ago, we worked closely with Lighthouse Cove, which used to be called the Ohio Alliance of Direct Support Professionals. And so they are an organization that worked directly with DSPs to help communicate the voice of the DSP to folks at the state level. And so in 2023, they did in-person meetings with DSPs. They called it the DSP Experience, where they ask a lot about their work, what was important to them, and from that, they created the DSP Experience Report. The 5 things that came out of that report about what is important to DSPs and providers was first being treated as a professional, being heard and sharing their voice, receiving appropriate training and support, understanding person-centered plans, and ensuring that the plans reflected the person being supported. And so this is why, or at least to me, these 5 things that DSPs directly told us was important to them. You have a pop-up, Haida, that came up on the screen. Thanks. That is why talking about empowering and engage and empowering people in the direct support role to have a voice is so very important. Go ahead. All right. So today, in the conversation, we're going to talk about a little bit about the person-centered planning process. I know all of you have, at least if you are currently serving someone, you've probably been through that process, the ISP development or person-centered planning process. But we're going to just quickly touch on that. We're going to discuss the essential elements of a person-centered plan, and a little bit about how DSPs can make sure those elements are covered in the plan. We're going to talk about empowering DSPs and providers to find ways to actively participate in the planning process. We're going to identify some communication tools, and we're going to identify some future action steps that can be taken to make sure that the voice of the direct support professional is heard. So, what is person-centered planning? A person-centered plan is a detailed and individualized plan that is directed by the person, built around strengths and preferences, goals, and desired life outcomes. It focuses on what is important to the person and what is important for the person. And then it outlines those supports to help them live the life they choose. We just got to.
Oh, no.
Henrietta, do you have a question?
Oh, no, I'm sorry.
That's okay. We just met with agency providers and did a similar training with them. And the one thing that we all kind of agree on is that in the person-centered planning process, there's the important to and the important for, but a lot of times the important for overtakes and outweighs the important to. So helping DSPs have a voice so that they can share not only what they know as professionals about the person, but also about what the person has shared with them about what's important will help to balance that conversation about important to and important for. Go ahead. So this is what the person-centered planning process looks like. So in the middle is the person and the relationships that they have with the people closest to them. And the process starts out with discovery, where we get to know about the person and what is and identify what is important to and for them. And I think a lot of times people think about this being a process that only the SSA does. But in reality, direct support professionals, independent providers, family members even are really doing this process all the time, because they're discovering new things about the person they support every single day. Their preferences change. How they like things to be done changes. They are assessing people. They may not be using a formal assessment tool like an SSA does, but they are looking at, okay, if we do this, is there a risk? If we do this, is there a benefit? Is this important to the person? Is it important for the person? What does the person like? What don't they like? What have they told me? Have I asked the person? All of that is assessment, and bringing that information to the table as part of the planning process is not just the role of the SSA, but it is the role of the provider. And as an independent provider, you may personally be at the meeting and you're able to share that. If you are a direct support professional who's an employee of an agency, you yourself may not be at the meeting, but it's important to talk to your frontline supervisors or other leaders within your organization to talk about, how can this happen? How can I share what I know with you to make sure that that gets to the team meeting and is considered when developing plans for the person. Planning is obviously the meeting, but the one thing to remember about planning is that planning happens continuously. It is not just the annual meeting. So if someone's needs change, if their wants change, if there's something new about the person, we need to be initiating with the team lead a new conversation. And that could be a formal meeting, and it may just be an informal conversation. But because we have a relationship with the person, which puts us in many cases closer to the person than most other people in their lives, we are often going to be knowledgeable as direct support professionals about things that other members of the team won't be. So it is important that we think about the planning process as being a continual process that isn't just an annual meeting. Once the plan is developed or there are changes in put into the plan, then it's the next part of the process is the actual service delivery, the work that you all do. And then there's monitoring. And again, I think a lot of us think about monitoring being the SSA coming to visit and looking at my documentation, or the department coming to do my compliance review. But you're also monitoring. You're monitoring someone's reaction to something. You're monitoring their body language. You're monitoring their gestures. You're monitoring their behaviors, because behavior is communication. You are constantly monitoring a person's response to service delivery so that you can go back again and initiate this planning process anytime during the year to say, hey, based on my observation, the monitoring I've been doing, something has changed and we as a team need to address it. So again, I mentioned there are 6 essential elements of a person-centered plan. A person-centered plan is respectful and empowering. It uses plain language so that we can respect the person's level of ability to understand. It doesn't use jargon. And it creates a picture of the person that is empowering. We often want to focus again on a person's needs or deficits, but the person-centered plan should really focus on the person's skills and successes, or how we can support them to be more successful, so that that plan is empowering. It uses a trauma responsive approach, meaning that we take into consideration the life experiences of the person, and that we use them to determine how to best provide the services and help meet the person's wants and needs. It's about making connections throughout the plan. It's about making sure that the plan is detailed enough that it is consistent with the person's wants and needs, and it is developed in a way in which it can be implemented in all environments. So how many of you support a person who either lives in your home with you, but they're not a relative, or maybe you're going to the home of the person, maybe they live with a family member, but you're going in a few hours a day to support them in that environment. And what you realize is that the way you do something when you're supporting the person is exactly the opposite, or not at all connected with the way that the family or the person that they live with or share the house with, is providing it. Or maybe the person goes to a day program during the day, and the way that they are reacting to someone's, behavior or needs is very different than you. So it's important that one of the elements in the plan is that it makes connections throughout the plan between the providers about what is important to the person, what is important for the person, and how to develop consistency in implementing those services. It's detailed and thorough. Again, that really ties into that making connection. It has clear outcomes and experiences. Anyone who picks up that plan should be able to clearly see what is important to the person, what is important for the person, and what outcomes the person wants to work on and try to fulfill during that plan year. And then there should be a clear description of services and supports. And I'm sure as direct support professionals and as providers, there have been many a times when you have looked at that plan and you have said, I still have no idea of what I'm supposed to be doing, or this plan is not at all reflective of the person that I really know. And so your voice in making sure that that plan hits all 6 of these essential elements is vital. So the role of the direct support professional in that planning process is really, really built upon the idea that the professional is a valued part of the person's support network, and they have a clear role within the team. After the person, every member of the team should be considered equally important. So as we talked about, the person is the center of the plan. And we just talked earlier with our agency providers and other colleagues about how to empower the person to actively participate in their plan. But once we address the idea and the concept that the person really is who the plan is focused on and they should carry the most weight in the planning process, every other member of the team is important, whether that is a physician who is coming to the team meeting because they're providing care for the person, their medical care, and for whatever reason they come to the meeting. Usually that happens in group home settings, or it's the direct support professional. Their role and value in the team is equal. DSPs and independent providers must be recognized as being professionals and part of that team and have a valued role. Efforts must be made to bring what the DSP knows about the person to the discussion. And so again, I think I mentioned this in the earlier part. If you are an independent provider, it's probably more likely that you are regularly participating in team meetings than if you are a direct support professional who is an employee of an agency. But it doesn't mean that your value, your voice isn't valued the same. It's just that the process of getting that voice heard in the team meetings is a little bit different. And so I encourage every direct support professional who works for an agency to go back to your frontline supervisors after today's discussion and say, what does our process look like to make sure that what I know about the person gets there? You know, does your frontline supervisor come to you once a month and ask you about what you know about the person? Anything new you learned about Ann this month? Like, did you have a really good experience with Ann? Did you have a really bad experience with Ann? Does your agency have any type of documentation where it'll ask for you to not only complete those required elements, date of service, place of service, service code, but it also allows you to share what you learned about the person, how that experience went, what was successful, what wasn't successful. So if you work for an agency, go back and have that conversation with your frontline supervisors. If you're an independent provider, think about your documentation. And is there a way that you are documenting, like, oh, I don't want to forget about this. Like, this was a really good experience with the person today. I want to make sure we bring this up at the next team meeting so that we can duplicate that and replicate that. And then teams should develop tools that can be used to include the provider voice as part of the planning process. So whether that's your agency providing you that opportunity or whether the SSA is also saying, hey, I'd really like for you to, fill out this questionnaire before the meeting so that I have a better idea and we can be more purposeful in our planning. If those things aren't happening, I encourage you as a professional to advocate on your behalf to either your SSA or your employer about how can we make sure that what I know about the person is an important part of the planning process. So person-centered planning must ensure the person leads the process. It must focus on important to, it must address important for, and those are two different things, focusing on and addressing. So again, we want to balance so that important to is as important in the plan discussion as important for, because we do have to address health and safety needs. We do have to address medical needs. But we also want to focus on what's important too. It needs to foster communication with all members of the team, including the person. It needs to be built upon and identify strengths and skills. And then when a person has an area that they need to improve in or learn skills on, how do we look at their current strengths and skills to help them improve or gain more skills in that area? It should create community. It should address barriers and identify solutions. So we don't want to plan just to say someone can't do this without having a solution. And we want to make sure that everybody who's part of that team is weighing in based on their knowledge of the person on what those solutions can be, in addition to the person potentially identifying solutions. It should develop realistic and meaningful outcomes. You shouldn't be working on outcomes that are just rote. We do it because we have to do it. Or we've been doing the same outcome for the last 3 years. They really should be realistic and meaningful. And then it should be updated regularly. Okay. So what, like we said, the person leads the process, but providers help to ensure the team hears the person's voice. They spend the most time with the person. You get to see what they enjoy, what frustrates them. You really get to see who the person really is, not just what's written in a file. And you can collect data during observations, conversations, and service delivery that will help empower the person to have a voice in their own planning process. Go ahead. What's important to the person? We should be looking at favorite routines, foods, activities, and people that they choose. What makes them smile, relax, or feel proud? What things do they avoid or dislike? Your knowledge, your everyday knowledge ensures that details are included so the plan supports the life a person really wants. What's important for the person? We should be looking at changes in sleep, appetite, or mood, identifying and sharing concerns about safety, sensory needs. Is a person overstimulated when they go to Walmart on Saturdays? So therefore, the plan shouldn't address doing grocery shopping on the weekends. We need to look at supports that help a person stay regulated. How can we help them ensure that these details are included in the plan, again, supporting the wants and needs of the person. How the person communicates, how the person shows yes, no, stop, what signs of stress or joy look like, what communication tools actually work in real life. So there may be assumptions about how people communicate, but you all as DSPs know what that really looks like. You know how the person communicates with you. We also should be making sure that we're sharing with the teams when the person doesn't use words to communicate, what do they use to communicate? And AAC is augmented alternative communication. So that could be the use of a communication board, a talker, any type of technology that helps the person communicate. Strengths and skills, what the person can do independently, what they are currently learning, what motivates them, and where they shine. Where are they their absolute best? Is that at work and they just love going to work? Is that at church with friends? What does that look like? Because what it looks like in that environment, sharing that knowledge can help replicate it in other environments. Okay. Community participation, again, sharing the information that you know about the places they enjoy going, where they don't like to go. Are there activities that they engage in longer than other activities, showing that they have a preference? All of these things are based on the supports you provide that help them succeed in the community. So again, making sure that you are sharing your voice about what you know about all of these different elements. What gets in the way? Want to make sure that you're sharing what you know about their triggers or stressors. What calms the person? What routines or tools make things easier? And vice versa. What routines or tools make things harder? I share this example all the time. A routine for me that starts before 9 is not going to be a successful routine. I am not a morning person. My husband is up at 5:40 or 5:30 every single morning, spends 2.5 hours watching the news, sipping his coffee, eating his yogurt, doing his exercises, like 2.5 hours. I'm like, seriously, that's 2.5 hours of sleep. I'm up at 8:45 hoping to be on a call at 9 that's on my calendar. So we're very different people. He's in bed at 10. I'm still chatting with my friends on Facebook at 2 o'clock in the morning. So those are the routines that for him makes his life easier, but for me would make my life much harder. And the people that know this best, aside from the person, is usually the direct support professional and the independent provider. Realistic and meaningful outcomes. should be based on what the person wants, should be achievable with the right supports, should be connected to real life, not just doing it for compliance sakes. We all know there are things we have to do for compliance. We all know that there have to be outcomes in the plan, but that certainly doesn't mean that we put one in there just because we think two isn't enough. So don't make it based on compliance. Please make it meaningful for the person, and not just because that's the way we've always done it. Anne is always going to need support getting up at 7 o'clock in the morning. So we are going to continue to have outcomes in there that says Anne is going to get up and go to work and have a job that starts at 7. No, that is not my outcome. I'll go to a job that starts at noon and I'll work till 8. So, all right. Keeping the plan alive. The plan is it's fluid, it's living and breathing. I contemplate giving this example every time because it's somewhat morbid, but I know a lot of us have been to funerals or to celebration of life where the minister, the preacher will get up and they'll talk about the year you were born, the year you died, and the dash in between. And it's really about how you live your life, right? Well, that concept, that analogy is similar in our world when we talk about the plan start date and the plan end date. And there's a dash between those two things, right? And so what is happening between those two dates? And we know that it's not stagnant. It's not the same day over and over and over again for 364 days between those two start and end dates, right? And so we have to keep that plan alive as people's preferences change, as they gain new skills. If once we identify that something's not working, or something really is working, how do we share that throughout the plan year so that it absolutely has a direct impact on changes to the plan, that not only have a positive impact on the person and I think makes them more satisfied with their services, but it also has a positive impact on you as direct support professionals, because continuing to do something over and over again that doesn't work is, I know there's a saying about that being the definition of stupidity, I think is what it is. But it doesn't make sense. It makes absolutely no sense. And it also makes your life harder because what's happening? The person is refusing. The person is beginning to, have behaviors around having to do that service or go somewhere when they don't want to, right? And it makes your support much more challenging. If we are working on what makes people happy, if we're working on things that, are what they actually want, that they value, it's going to certainly make supporting that person much easier. And I recognize too, and we talked about this a little bit with the agencies, there is a dynamic between being a provider and being the SSA who is considered the team lead. And it's important to look at what does that relationship look like. And sometimes those are the most wonderful relationships. Providers and SSAs have great relationships, but we've all experienced a situation where there has been a question of what the provider's motives are when they identify a change or a need or something that should be, changed. And so just making sure you're cognizant of how you're addressing that with other members of the team, especially if that relationship is a little bit tense, is really important. But also advocating for yourself to say, I am a professional. I do have knowledge that is important to the team. I also believe that this is in the best interest of the person I support. It's based on their wants, their needs. And so I'd really like to bring that to the attention of the team. Can we put together a new meeting? So, keeping track of these things that we've talked about in some type of documentation helps to validate when you go back and say, hey, there's a need for a change. All right, maybe I'm going through this super fast. We might be done earlier. I was really slow on the other one. Oftentimes, as direct support professionals, you have a closer relationship with the person than almost anybody else in their lives. Um, we know that family is close, but we also know people that we support who don't have close relationships with their families. We know that many times, if you're not a family caregiver, you are doing a either shared living situation or supporting person in their own home, and the frequency is a lot. You see them a lot more than maybe visits from sister and brother or niece or whoever, right? And so you often are the first ones to see changes in the person, or you are the person's go-to when they want to talk about they have built a relationship of trust with you, and so they want to go to you and talk to you about something that's important to them. Maybe it's something they wouldn't share with a family member. We often know that the relationship between an adult child with a disability and their family is one in which there are protections put in place that most adult children don't experience in their typical life. And so it's a challenge sometimes for adult children with disabilities to talk about things like intimacy, sexual relationships, different lifestyles, the desire to be more independent. Those are topics that are often difficult to talk with a family member about. And so you find yourselves in a role in which you are often being confided in by the person you support. And so keeping track of that, making sure that in a way in which you don't breach confidentiality, you're implementing that into how you support the person, conversations with the team about what the person needs, or empowering the person by your support to feel comfortable and confident in having that conversation themselves with their SSA or with their team. So each situation is unique. Every relationship that each of you have with the people you support is unique, and you're going to have to use that to help kind of guide you on how do I take what's been, shared with me by the person as something that's important to them, and do it in a way in which I'm not putting them in an awkward position. I'm not breaching their confidentiality. I always suggest that you start with, how can I support you to have this conversation with your parents, with your guardian, with your team? And that should always be the first route we go, is supporting the person to have their voice heard. And if that's not an option, then talking about, how can I support you to share what you've told me in a way that results in change to your plan and to the services that we're supporting you. Um, so as you are documenting or keeping track of, I don't want anybody to go away with the assumption that what we're suggesting is you need to create another piece of paper. That really isn't it. If that's the best way for you to keep track of these kinds of things, then absolutely do that, right? But just have a consciousness of, I need to be keeping track of this because it's useful data. It's data that I can use to share with the team. It's data I can use to support the person's voice, and it's data I can use to engage my voice in the process. So when you talk about these areas that we've talked about, routines and preferences, you want to describe what the person chooses, what they avoid, what they enjoy, maybe again something they've talked to you in private about. You want to keep track of that in a way that you can again use it in planning for meetings and uh, plan development for the person. Behavioral communication. Um, Behavior is a form of communication. And I think that too often teams go overboard a little bit with how they address behaviors. There are days that I have really bad days. And during that bad day, I may choose to isolate and withdraw. I may choose to yell at my husband. I may choose to break a plate. I don't know, but we all have days where our emotions, our mental health is at a point where we're not our best, and people get to see our behaviors, but nobody's writing a plan for me. My husband is saying to me, and people that support and love me are saying, man, you were not yourself yesterday. What was going on? How could I have helped you? You could have called me. I get that positive support. But generally, we immediately go to how can we change the person's behavior? And so, as direct support professionals, you know what someone's baseline is. You know what the intensity is. You know what the frequency of these different behaviors are. And you need to help the team gauge that in a way that doesn't overregulate a person having a bad day. Um, so making sure that you are communicating with the team, keeping track of and sharing things about, how the person shows um, comfort and distress. And maybe the way the person shows distress is they have a bad day. That's not unusual. That doesn't mean it's a behavior. Um, and so, there was something else I wanted to say about this. And I'm sorry, I totally lost my train of thought on that. So again, that is data that's really important in having conversations, especially around behavioral supports that might be implemented in the plan. Sensory and environment. Again, I think this often ties into conversations about behavior support, but what sensory factors help or overwhelm the person? So again, did they exhibit you had to write up a UI, maybe even an MUI, but did they exhibit that behavior that resulted in the UI or the MUI, or even that we had to implement an unapproved behavior support because they were in an environment that was overloaded with sensory stimuli, it overwhelmed the person, and maybe that's exactly why it happened. And we can regulate that without having some type of a plan in place. Engagement and participation. It is so important for you to share what you know about the person when it comes to what do they enjoy, what motivates them, what they don't like. We all know there's a huge emphasis on community integration, as there should be, and making sure that people are, living their best lives. They're out in the community, engaging with their neighbors and their friends. But there's also an importance to not just be doing it to do it. It's important to make sure that those activities are things that someone enjoys. Taking a ride to go to the grocery store or to the Dollar Tree is not something that I would consider, wow, I'm out there engaging in the community. I love it. It's something that I want to do again. And I see oftentimes documentation of community integration that includes things like that. We all have to go to the grocery store once in a while. We all have to run to Dollar Tree once in a while. But I don't consider that community integration or engagement for myself. It is just part of mundane life. So how do we get out of that? Well, this is what we've always done. And yeah, they were outside of the house, but was it true community engagement and participation? So what you know about the person when it comes to what motivates them, what do they like, is really helpful in building a plan for participation in activities that's meaningful. Next, health, wellness, and regulation. Um, any signs of pain, changes in sleep patterns, changes in appetite. These can often be indicators of um, an unmet mental health need. I give an example of a young man that I worked with years ago when I worked at the county board I'm going to give my age. Back then we were called case managers. But I worked with this really neat young man. But he also had a difficult time self-regulating, and so he exhibited a lot of behaviors. But we typically knew what those behaviors were. We knew what the precursors were. We had a direct support professional who brought up to her manager that when they were assisting him with oral hygiene, they were seeing a lot more red blood in his spit after he would brush his teeth. And then someone else noticed that he always liked coffee in the morning, and you actually had to verbally try to slow him down because he would drink it so hot that it could burn him, but like he wanted it the minute it came out of the coffee pot. And they were seeing him let the coffee sit for 15-20 minutes before he drank it, and it was like, why is he letting it cool? And his behaviors had gone up. He was like, they were very intense. There had been a number of peer-to-peer, which was unusual. It wasn't like him to target his peers. So everybody on the team was trying to figure out like what made this change? Why did this stuff change? And when the DSP told us about the blood in the during oral hygiene, the change in hot and cold drinking, somebody said, when was the last time he was at the dentist? And it had been a while. So they got him in with the dentist. And because he was nonverbal, he wasn't able to tell us that he had a huge abscess back around his molar. And it wasn't a place you could visually see it, but it was so abscessed. They had to drain. I mean, I can't imagine the level of pain he was in. And had it not been for the DSPs who were documenting and observing this and sharing that with folks that were part of the team, I don't know how much longer he would have gone with that. And so that is super important. And again, goes back to that relationship and opportunity that DSPs have, to have that regular contact with people. Their communication profile, how do they communicate? What types of nonverbal communication do they use? Even for people who use words to communicate, oftentimes you're going to be the one, again, as a direct support professional, who might be sitting in a team meeting with the person, and you're going to express your voice by saying, wait a minute, Anne needs a couple minutes to process this. Can we just give her a couple minutes? I have a hard time with silence. So I need to be reminded when I'm speaking, when I'm presenting, when I'm leading meetings, that other people process things differently, and I need to be comfortable with silence. And so I've been in lots of meetings where either myself will just restart. Oh, anybody got anything to say? Nope. Okay, let's move on. And so, not only for yourself as a DSP to share what you know about the person and elevate your voice, but also to allow the person to have a voice. It's often what we know about their communication profile that allows us to ask that team to, can we just have a moment of silence so Anne can think about it? And I'm sure she'll give us a response. And then quality of life indicators. Again, focusing on and trying to use your knowledge, your role in that team to help the team begin to focus on those positives. So thinking about sharing moments of joy, pride, how did this person feel when they got their first paycheck? How did this person feel when their new niece was born? Anne just had this really great experience, and I want to share that experience with you. Also, we want to share, those things that frustrate the person, maybe where they show boredom, maybe also places in which they're independent and how to increase their independence. So all of those quality indicators that you all as direct support professionals are going to see before anybody else, it's important for you to capture that however you choose to capture it, to make sure that as you're engaging with the team, you're amplifying your voice by sharing, these are the things I know about the person that we are here to support. So don't wait until it's time for the annual planning meeting. Be prepared ahead of time by asking, how can I be involved? Know how to share your knowledge. Never hesitate to give feedback. collect data and share data through documentation of outcomes and observations, ask for revisions when needed, and make sure that you know who to contact. So again, if you are an independent provider, not that there's a chain of command, but generally as an independent provider, you don't have a supervisor supervising you. So your contact is directly with the SSA. But as a direct support professional, there may be within your organization a particular chain that you should follow through your home manager up to your regional director, then to, the CEO, if you can get that high, right? But know who to contact. Know that ahead of time. So you don't have to figure that out and waste, especially if it's a health and safety issue. I need to get somebody to know this, right? Know who that is. As a DSP, all of our direct support professionals and independent professionals are an essential advocate for the people that they support, to ensure that their wants and needs are voiced. And if you have not been asked to share your knowledge and you know that there is a team meeting coming up, reach out and ask how you can do that. Make sure that you are emphasizing your professionalism, and let them know that, hey, as a professional, I've been tracking my observations over the last year. I've been documenting services. I want to go over the patterns and trends and the themes that I'm seeing with services for this person, because I think it is a vital part of planning for the upcoming year for the person. So don't forget to also advocate for yourself, and acknowledging and asking the team to acknowledge your professionalism. In the world of direct support professionals, understanding the people you support is of utmost importance. The person's plan isn't just ink on paper. It's a living, breathing document that should tell you everything you need to know about the person you support. When you pick up a person-centered plan, you should be able to see the person you support in that plan. And if you can't, then you should be going back and asking the team why. What are you missing? Because this is not consistent with what I know about the person, with what my experiences have been, and what my knowledge about the person is. So I want to give you an example of a situation that I ran into when I was doing compliance. The names have been changed to protect the innocent. But I was reviewing a provider who was supporting a person named Ethan. And Ethan had in his plan, which was a really well written plan. It had the whole section about what you need to know about me. And it talked about how he was a very neat person. He was really particular about what he looked like. It was very important to him to look good, to smell good. He was very invested in getting a girlfriend. And so his personal hygiene, wearing cologne, that was even identified. Like he had a preferential cologne that he liked to have, and he wore it. And sometimes the DSPs needed to remind him when too much was too much. So all that to be said, his presentation, what he looked like, was really, really important to him. So in his plan, it talked about the frequency of him getting haircuts and going to his local barbershop or hairstylist or whoever he was going to. And the provider began to notice that he, like, they would try to go and he would get upset and he would be like, I'm not going, I don't want to go. And so as a reviewer, we were seeing that they weren't meeting the frequency in the plan for going out to the community to get haircuts. And so we were about to issue a citation for them not meeting the frequency in the plan, when the direct support professional who happened to be working that day, and this was someone who was served by an agency. So, if you work for an agency, when the state comes, the frontline supervisors or the regional director or somebody who's only in the house once a week or whatever comes to talk with the reviewer, right? And I'm going to giggle because I think that's why you get a lot of citations, because the people representing the agency aren't the people doing the work, so they don't always know the answers or how to get the compliance reviewer the answer. So anyway, the DSP happened to overhear the conversation. She came over and she explained to us, I noticed that Ethan has started listening to this new band. Like he has a playlist on his YouTube that he listens to all the time, and he's been changing, and he's got this new band that he really likes. And it just happened to be a band that I was familiar with. I love music. I love all genres of music, and it was kind of a pseudo kind of heavy metal band, and these guys all had like hair that was either at their shoulders or maybe a little bit longer, a little gruffy looking kind of thing, right? They weren't going every 6 weeks to the barbershop to get a haircut. And so while in Ethan's plan at the beginning of the year, that was important to him and he wanted to look good and he thought short hair was the way that men looked good and it might help him get a girlfriend. He now wanted to emulate the guys in the band and he wanted to let his hair grow. It was all about him wanting to let his hair grow. And so now, from a compliance perspective, our questions change, not from why aren't you documenting this and meeting the frequency to what have you done to make the team aware that something has changed for the person so the plan can be updated and changed. And they hadn't really done anything with that. And part of it was because they weren't listening to the DSP. No one had asked her. No one had implemented, like, here's a place on the documentation sheet for you to give us observations or something, And maybe it's a nuance that it was something even the DSP wouldn't have thought it mattered until the reviewer brought it up. But it's just an example of that DSP knew something that nobody else knew about. And had that DSP within the culture of the organization understood their role and how important sharing that knowledge was and how important their voice was, they wouldn't have had a plan that for almost 9 months, they've been having power struggles with Ethan to try to get him to go get a haircut so they would be in compliance. And they would have been able to take that right out of the plan, not had to worry about it. So that's just an example that I go back to a lot about our role as direct support professionals, as independent providers, is not only to listen and observe, it's also to figure out how do I take the knowledge that I've gained from listening and observing and to providing these services to really have an impact to I'm so sorry, I'm laughing. Amber said that the example of Ethan was in a training. I'm assuming, Amber, a training that DODD did, the provider training. So I did leave all of my presentations when I left the department. So that's funny. Thank you for telling me that, Amber. So all that being said, even something as small as when a person or how often a person gets a haircut is empowering for that person. It helps to make sure that their services meet their needs and that they're living the life they want to live, even if it is something mundane like changing their hairstyle. Because if you think about that on a silly little thing like cutting someone's hair, what are the things you know about a person that are valuable? And not that hairstyle is not valuable, but on the hierarchy of things, right? What is it that you know that is at the upper level of that hierarchy that you're just not thinking about sharing or you're not given the opportunity to share? And so I encourage each of you to think about what those are. Think about the Ethans that you serve and what is it that you know about them that you need to think about. How do I empower myself to share my voice and make sure those things get heard by the team? All right, I'm going to jump to chat because we just have a couple of minutes. Okay, both for Amber. So thank you again for sharing that example is still being shared. I love it. And I always think I wonder whatever happened to Ethan. I don't know. So there is a question about House Bill 795. We've only got 2 minutes, and House Bill 795, which turned into Senate Bill 315, could be a 7-hour presentation. Right now, Amber, nothing. So here's where we are. So Senate House Bill 795, which was about combating fraud, is absolutely going to have a huge impact on all Medicaid providers. Um, because of the way they do legislation, they took it out of the House bill and they moved it over to Senate Bill 315. That really doesn't mean anything to us, just means it got to the governor's desk using a different route than they had initially. There were some changes that the field supported that ended up getting changed. There were a couple things that didn't. And you can go to our Network 19 Facebook page and go back through and read all the updates I put in there if you want to learn more about Senate Bill 315 and what ended up being in it. It has not yet been signed by the governor, so it is still sitting as of this morning. It is still sitting on the governor's desk. I think it went to his desk on either Monday or Tuesday, and I believe he has 14 days to sign it into law. Once he signs it into law, he has already signed an order that requires the new rules that will support Senate Bill 315 to be considered emergency rules. That just means that they get filed quicker. They'll get through the process of rule writing quicker. I believe that he gave 90 days for rule writing. So at this point, we know what the big general points are, but the rules haven't been written yet on how we're going to implement changes in our system to meet those requirements. So we are at kind of a standstill until that happens. So not really seeing anything. We did hear that compliance is beginning to make some changes in how they're doing compliance reviews, where they are going to be including some type of a billing review. We're not sure how accurate that is. We've not yet seen that implemented or what that will look like. I will say this, the department has access to all your billing, so there should be a way for them to internally look at that, and then when they come on site, maybe ask for something to verify a question or whatever, but we don't even know what that's going to look like. But those are the kind of things I think we would anticipate seeing, is that more attention being paid to the billing process, and probably for those of you that will end up having to use EVV, probably more attention to the EVV process will be built into oversight, but we don't know yet what that looks like. So Amber, I hope that helped. Please continue to monitor the Network 19 Facebook page. If you don't have Facebook, if you're not signed up for it, HIDA, can independent providers sign up for 19 services updates that Zoe sends out?
We can certainly add them. They are typically agency provider like focused, but there's definitely news in there that would be helpful. Yep.
Okay. Okay. So we'll take a look at how we can do that. And probably my recommendation will be that we go back to the people that are on the registrations for these and start with them. And then maybe we'll get a broader communication out on how to sign up for those. But those are going to be the kind of places, at least from us, where you can get updates. Memo Monday. I will say again, just my experience of working at the department, Memo Monday is probably very generalized information. You're not going to get a lot of detail. The Arc of Ohio, if you're not connected with them, you should connect with them because they're putting out a lot of information in detail. And then Opera, Ohio Waiver Network, those organizations that support providers are also sharing out a lot. So watching their websites, I think, will also help. So letting you know that, again, we appreciate you being here. Apologize for going over a few minutes with you because we know how important and valuable your time is. A copy of the PowerPoint slide and any of the handouts we talked about will be sent out to you using the email address you signed up with. Also, a recording of today's session will be posted on our YouTube channel within it'll be there early next week. There is a link in your PowerPoint that you will get that will take you directly to that. Our next session will be held July 16th at 11:30, and we're going to be talking about the new DSP Code of Ethics. And if you have any general questions, my email address is also in the PowerPoint. I did notice that there is someone with their hand up, so we will try to quickly do that. If you can hang on and you want to hear this conversation, feel free. If you need to go off, we understand that as well. So, Jan, go ahead. You can take yourself off of mute, and if you still have a question.
Yeah, you touched on it when you mentioned your Facebook page and the ARC, because there's so much information out there. Some of it sounds similar, but then there's some differences, and I think it becomes confusing when you see so much information put out on social media. But you did very well touch on some of the Facebook sites that keep up to date on everything. So I appreciate that.
Absolutely. And you're right. I'm probably a member of 10 or 12 different provider-based sites, independent provider, Ohio Shared Living providers, et cetera. And there is a lot of conversation going on with them. There's a lot of people who think maybe they know the answers, or are making conjecture about what the answers are. So I do encourage you, the Ohio Department of Medicaid has a whole page dedicated to fraud and the implementation of Senate Bill 315. So take what you see on Facebook with a grain of salt. I think there's a lot of truth in it. I think there's a lot of personal experience in there. I think there's a lot of opinion in there. If you really want clear and pretty accurate answers, rely on those sources like Department of Medicaid, Department of DODD, the ARC of Ohio, Ohio Provider Resource Association. And I hope us, because I try really hard to make sure that our information is accurate, gathering them from those reliable sources. But I know that even I may not have the up-to-date information. And I just want to remind everybody, in case you don't know, I did retire in December, so I'm no longer affiliated with the department. I don't have the information or access to some of the information that I used to have in the past. Tiana?
Hi, yes, good afternoon.
Hi, you have a question?
Yes, I do. The last meeting we had with Network 19, you guys sent out